November 1995. It had been more than 3 years since ethnic, territorial, and religious differences resurfaced in Yugoslavia, tearing the country asunder and filling the land with bloodshed and atrocities, the likes of which had not been seen since World War II. The Bosnian War, as it was dubbed, has taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of people from all the ethnic groups involved. Thousands of miles away in the United States, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, leaders from Croatia, Serbia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina sat down and sought to create a peace agreement to end the suffering of all their people. On behalf of Serbia, there was a delegation headed by President Slobodan Milosevic. On behalf of Bosnia-Herzegovina, President Alija Izetbegović and his negotiators. And representing the Republic of Croatia was the team led by President Franjo Tuđman.
Jednog jutra probudili su me sa viješću da se dejtonski pregovori prekidaju jer da nije došlo do sporazuma. I da će se nastaviti u pogodno vrijeme kad se gledišta približe. Pitao sam o čemu je problem, pa kaže nisu se mogli sporazumjeti oko Brčkog. I ja kažem onda redom predstavnicima, američkim predstavnicima, srpskim, osim šta hoćete sada značiti zbog Brčkog, jednog detalja, da se nastavi rat, da se nastavi tragedija naroda i Bosne i Hercegovine i uopće, znači, jedna užasna situacija se nastavlja prema tome. Evo vam rješenje, dajte da se odredi, da se to pitanje riješi arbitražom. I onda su prihvatili, redom prihvatili su predstavnici američki predstavnici i srpski, i muslimanski. I tako, znači, je došlo do Dejtonskog sporazuma, do, znači, angažiranja Sjedinjenih država i NATO-a u okončanju bosanske krize.
We've reached a day that many believed would never come. After 3 weeks of intensive negotiations here in Dayton, the leaders of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, and Serbia have agreed to end the war in the former Yugoslavia. They have agreed that 4 years of destruction is enough. The time has come to build peace with justice.
I think it was a very difficult agreement. In the first place, to reach such an agreement was a very important result. I think after such a bloody action, it was something. It was a success of diplomacy.
Croatia's President Tuđman did not arrive at Dayton purely as a diplomat or a figurehead. His key leadership, working with President Izetbegović and his own Croatian army generals, had helped the Croatian army win many victories against a Serb army once believed to be the dominant military force in the region. These victories in the summer of 1995 had forced the once dominant Serbs to the bargaining table.
Treba poći od činjenice da do Dejtonskog sporazuma i do Dejtonskih pregovora pa i sporazuma ne bi došlo da prije toga Hrvatska nije odnijela pobjedu u ratu. A ta pobjeda u ratu bila je rezultat isključivo hrvatske politike, hrvatske snage, hrvatske samostalnosti u vođenju ne samo obrambenog rata, nego uopće politike.
Tuđman's arrival as leader of his country seems almost predestined. While he may never have consciously prepared for this role, if one examines how his life collided with the growth and collapse of Tito's communist Yugoslavia, one can sense that fate lent Franjo Tuđman a helping hand. Franjo Tuđman was born on May 14, 1922, in Veliko Trgovište near Zagreb, the capital of Croatia. Just 4 years earlier, in 1918, Croatia had become part of Yugoslavia, which was then a monarchy ruled by the Serbian dynasty of Karađorđević. This first Yugoslavia had been created by the Versailles Treaty of Paris after World War I. However, Versailles not only failed to resolve existing deep-seated problems between the region's populations, it actually managed to create new ones between Croats, Serbs, Macedonians, Slovenians, Muslims, and Albanians, all of whom were striving to create individual national identities. King Alexander Karađorđević ruled this forced alliance like a dictator. An example of this can be seen in an historic document from that period, a bill from the Serbian police charging a Croatian family for 4 bullets fired into their father, who was sentenced to death. Families were forced to pay the expenses of their loved ones' executions. Needless to say, the Croats were very dissatisfied with Yugoslavia. They had envisioned it as a confederation of all the involved nationalities, not as a Serb-dominated state, which the Croats called Yugoserbia.
Srbi su shvatili to ujedinjenje kao proširenje velike Srbije. I nade Hrvatske u stvaranje zajedničke države su se izjalovile. Hrvatska je bila podređena velikosrpskim ambicijama o stvaranju, proširenju, širenju Srbije. Tako da je jedan od stvaratelja te zajedničke države, Ante Trumbić, veoma brzo poslije 2 godine napustio tu vladu, tada još vladu Kraljevine Srba, Hrvata i Slovenaca, i započela je borba hrvatskog naroda za ravnopravne odnose.
Croatia's history and heritage is one of the oldest European nations. There are written documents showing Croatia was recognized by the Byzantine emperors and the Catholic Church as early as the 7th century AD. After the death of a powerful Croatian king around 1100, Croatia allied itself with Hungary and later Austria and shared a monarch while still retaining their individual culture. But for almost 900 years, Croatians dreamed of being autonomous once more. It was only in 1991 that Franjo Tuđman was able to lead the Croatian people and help achieve their dream of an individual nation once again. The Croats tried to resist Serbia's expansion to the west between the wars. One of the charismatic leaders of this time was Stefan Radić, who was the leader of the Croatian Peasant Party. Radić strived to renew Croatian sovereignty and bring forth the economic and cultural emancipation of Croatia. A true pacifist who advocated nonviolence, Radić, known as Croatia's Gandhi, was assassinated during a Yugoslav parliamentary session in 1928, an assassination organized by the royal court in Belgrade. Tuđman's father, Stefan, was one of Radić's followers and a prominent member of the Croatian Peasant Party. He was greatly affected by Radić's death, and it was only a year later when he faced another tragedy with the death of his wife, Justina. Franjo was only 7 years old when his father was left to raise him and his 2 brothers, Ivica and Stefan, alone.
Nažalost, moja mladost i djetinjstvo nije bilo, da tako kažem, veselo. Ja sam ostao bez majke u 7. godini. A sa 2 mlađe braće. Prema tome, od 7. godine na svoj način trebao sam biti onaj koji je i brinuo o toj. Otac je bio neprestano u političkim borbama protiv šestosječanske diktature, protiv te protohrvatske Jugoslavije. Sjećate, jednom me je slao, imao sam valjda 11 godina, da nosim sa biciklom letke o Hrvatskoj, u borbi za hrvatsku slobodu. Iz Velikog Trgovišća, sela Zagorska, u Lisicu, jedno skoro 30 km. I onda ga je jedan prijatelj pitao, pa kako se usudiš da mu daš, pa on je dijete. Otac je rekao, on je dijete, ali je moj sin.
An exceptional student, Franjo attended elementary school in his hometown and high school and college in nearby Zagreb. In addition to his studies, he also participated in the outlawed Croatian National Democratic Movement, for which he was taken into custody in 1940 at the age of 18.
Još sjećanje mog oca, koji je rekao, kad su mi nekako stvorili uvjete da idem u srednju školu, jer sam bio najbolji đak, a otac nije imao uvjeta. Otac mi je rekao, sine, budeš li kao i druga pokvarena gospoda, koji dok su mladi su napredni, slobodomni, a kad završe škole, onda postaje narodni kolikuže. Ne dolazi mi pred oči.
The monarchy of King Alexander Karađorđević ended with his assassination in Marseille. The regent, Pavle Karađorđević, finally agreed to give the Croats some political and territorial autonomy. This so-called autonomy resulted in the creation of Banovina, the dukedom of Croatia. It included a part of the ancient historic Croatian territory in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Vlatko Maček became leader of the Croatian Peasant Party after Radić's assassination and was the political leader of the dukedom. But he did not have time to gain any greater independence for Croatia due to the terror about to grip Europe. Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich had begun their relentless and brutal assault in Europe. Benito Mussolini joined the Führer, aligning his fascist Italy with Nazi Germany. The Yugoslav kingdom was militarily defeated in 1941. This led to parts of Croatia being annexed to Italy and Hungary, and the rest of Croatia occupied by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. Yugoslavia no longer existed. A Croatian separatist group called Ustaša, a fascist group, centered around Ante Pavelić, who had lived and trained in Mussolini's Italy, gained wide influence during the war. In spite of the centuries-old desire for an independent state, the majority of Croats were deeply disappointed with the Pavelić regime, not only because of the circumstances that brought him to power, but because of his trading Croatian territory, especially to the advantage of Italy, which again received a part of the Croatian coast and some islands. These losses of Croatian land cannot be compensated, although he manages to gain Bosnian territories up to the Drina River. Parts of Croatia become unsafe due to the terror of the Serbs, who cannot reconcile themselves to the creation of a Croatian state. The regime also brought misfortune to many Serbs, Jews, Gypsies, and Croats, with its goal of having ethnically pure Croatian territories. Mass executions were organized in the infamous Jasenovac concentration camp. Undoubtedly, this is one of the darkest periods of Croatian history. When Hitler attacked the Soviet Union, Croatian communists and anti-fascists formed a movement which engaged in armed conflicts. The leader of this partisan movement was Josip Broz Tito, a Croat from the same region as Tuđman. Tito spent many years in Russia as a member of the Communist Party before returning to Yugoslavia just before the outbreak of World War II. Croatian anti-fascists, communist partisans, and the Croatian Peasants' Party become a powerful and successful military force fighting the Nazis and fascists, while the Serbian mass rebellion collapses. Franjo Tuđman, his father, and both brothers all joined the anti-fascist movement, fighting with the partisans.
Ja sam stupio 1941. znači u antifašistički pokret, napustio školovanje upravo zbog onog opredeljenja većine hrvatskog naroda protiv fašizma. Hrvatski narod je želio 1941. raspad Jugoslavije, želio je svoju državu. Ali većina hrvatskog naroda je vidjela da tu hrvatsku slobodu ne može ostvariti u okviru nacifašističke Europe, pa prema tome niti NDH koja je uspostavljena znači, u okviru tog hitlerovskog novog poretka. Nisam bio niti komunista, ni skojevac prije rata, nego znači jedan mlad čovjek koji je bio pod dojmom i pod utjecajem znači demokratskih, pacifističkih ideja ondašnjeg svijeta. Ali je komunistička stranka Jugoslavije, komunistička partija Hrvatske nastupila sa takvim programom koji je bio obećavajući i u nacionalnom demokratskom smislu.
Franjo's brother Stefan was killed in 1943 by the Nazis. Tuđman was the founder as well as the editor-in-chief of the partisan newspaper, the announcement of the Croatian Zagorje. Along the way, the Tuđman family began to doubt the aims of the anti-fascist struggle. They feared that after the war, Yugoslavia could be resurrected, and with it, another Serbian dictatorship over the Croats. This was not idle speculation. The Serbs had already begun to dominate the partisan movement, and soon thereafter, a leading Croatian, Andrija Hebrang, was removed from his leadership position within the anti-fascist movement. While there had been a significant number of Serbs who had sided with the Germans, a far greater majority resisted the Nazi occupation. Some joined the communist-led partisans fighting alongside Croats. Others joined the royalist forces known as Chetniks. Unfortunately, partisans ended up fighting the Chetniks as much as they fought the Germans, and the Chetniks occasionally collaborated with the Nazis to put down the partisans. It seemed everyone wanted to be on the winning side. As the war ended, the various forces jockeyed for position of control of the new Yugoslavia. Many Chetniks joined the partisans and then grabbed leadership positions in the new Yugoslavian army. World War II had ended in Europe. Military operations had ceased, but tragically, one last genocide was yet to occur, this time to Croatians. A huge massacre at Bleiburg on the Austrian border was the focal point of a post-war liquidation of what could have been as many as 250,000 Croatians at the hands of Tito's communist army and Serbian-controlled partisans, as well as forced death marches inflicted on soldiers, civilians, religious leaders, and other Croatians as Tito began to consolidate his power for his new Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was now resurrected. This second incarnation would no longer be a dictatorship masquerading as a monarchy. Tito would turn it into a reign of terror dictatorship masquerading as communism. Although the 6 separate socialist republics maintained statehood on paper, everything was subordinated to the grand Yugoslav ideal. Its continuing focus was to annihilate the national and cultural identities of every group but the Serbs.
Pokraj 45. Sam je bio sudionik tog hrvatskog zavnoha antifašističkog sabora. Ali bio čovjek, znači, 40. godine i prema tome vidio je s kim ima posla kad se ne pitao režimu. Došao na zasjedanje skupštine u Beograd i kaže mi, sine, zar smo se mi za to borili?
Although Tito was a Croat, he exhibited no preferential treatment to Croatians. On the contrary, he allowed the Serbs to control the Communist Party and the Yugoslavian army. 1946, Franjo Tuđman, a decorated war hero for his service with the partisans, was sent to the Advanced Military Academy in Belgrade, although he was not fully attracted to a career in the army. The communists pursued their vendetta against the Croats. Later in 1946, Tuđman's father Stefan, one of the principal founders of the anti-fascist movement in Croatia, was murdered along with Franjo's stepmother in their home due to their critical opposition of the new communist government. The executions were performed by the Yugoslav police, whose task it was to eliminate all ideological opponents to Tito's new government. The communists destroyed many houses of worship as they began to assume control of the country. Catholic churches and Muslim mosques were targeted, as well as their spiritual leaders. The communist campaign against the Catholic Church in Croatia focused on its most distinguished representative, the Archbishop of Zagreb, Dr. Aloysius Stepinac. Stepanec refused to secede from the Vatican and establish a separate Croatian Catholic Church. A symbol of the spiritual resistance against the communist regime, in 1946, Stepanec was sentenced to 16 years imprisonment. While in prison, he was elevated to cardinal by Pope Pius XII. Despite many protests from around the world, Stepanec remained in custody until his death. Communist Yugoslavia was set up as a federal republic with a promise from Tito for equality for all its nations. That promise was never fulfilled. The Serbs controlled Yugoslavia. Tito balanced Yugoslavia between the USSR and the West. By not falling under the control of Stalin, he was able to gain economic support from the capitalist West, but he refused to relinquish his autocratic control under communism. Franjo Tuđman spent his first 10 years after the war serving in the Ministry of Defense, yet all the while he opposed the growing centralization of the state. During this time, he married Ankica, whom he met while fighting with the partisans. They had 2 sons, Miroslav and Stefan, and 1 daughter, Nevenka. Growing disinterested in his bureaucratic work, Tuđman began his writing career, publishing essays on modern European history and his first book, The War Against War. In this work, he claims that the partisan fight in Croatia was part of an anti-fascist struggle which was working toward the end of all wars permanently. He began to publish works which took issue with the prevailing Yugoslav propagandist history. Tuđman suggested that every nation in Yugoslavia, Croatia, Slovenia, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Macedonia, should all have their own territorial defense troops to be activated in case of war. An idea which at the time was near blasphemous. Nevertheless, it was accepted by Tito in the late 1960s after the occupation of Czechoslovakia by the Soviets. As assistant editor of the Yugoslavian Military Encyclopedia, Tuđman clashed with the other editors who were dismissing the role of the Croatian anti-fascist forces as they rewrote the history of the first half of the century. Tuđman refused to be silenced. He argued until finally Marshal Tito himself was consulted, and he took Tuđman's side. Inspired by his wrangling with the other historians, Tuđman decided to promulgate a view that was more in line with the true events of history. He published a book titled Yugoslavia. In it, he described the true dimensions of the partisan war in Croatia during World War II, but this work received much opposition from Serbian historians. By now, Tuđman had grown rather unpopular with the Serbians in power. He retired from the army in 1961 at the age of 38 and left with the rank of Major General. Tuđman the warrior now made the inevitable transition to Tuđman the scholar. From 1961 to 1967, he held the position of director of the Institute for the History of the Party in Croatia. He held a number of senior political positions during this period as well, while also teaching as a professor of history at the University of Zagreb. His ideas continued to cause conflict. Zagreb in the 1960s, a Croatian city which had existed for a millennium, still kept the dream of the return of Croatian statehood alive as it tried to recover from the physical, emotional, and intellectual invasion of the communist dictatorship. Tuđman joined the intellectual circle which surrounded Miroslav Krleža, considered the greatest Croatian writer of the time. Tuđman earned his doctorate in 1965. His dissertation concerned the history of the first Yugoslavia after World War I. However, the current Yugoslavian elite would not allow his thesis to be published, as it conflicted with the party line. Tuđman was once again faced with the fact that the Serbs preferred to blame the Croats for the disintegration of the first Yugoslavia and for the horrors which befell the region in World War II. Tuđman continued to assault the prevailing Serb-dominated published history of Yugoslavia. An example was the reality of Jasenovac, where his work helped remove the Nazi label the Serbs had pinned on the Croats.
Bilo mi je jasno da su Ustaše, da je NDH počinio zločin, ali druga je stvar ako je tamo ubijeno kao što je u stvarnosti, prema mojim spoznajama, ubijeno između 30 i 40 tisuća ljudi, i to Srba, Židova, Cigana i hrvatskih antifašista, jer ako je ta brojka koja je užasna, onda je to moglo biti djelo jednog režima. Ali ako se kaže da je tamo pobijeno više od pola milijuna do 1,5 milijuna, onda je to jasno, onda je to krivica čitavoga naroda.
Some say there is collective guilt, that all are responsible for the actions of some collaborators. I don't subscribe to that personally. It's not a Christian principle. And one of the great speeches given by President Reagan was in his visit to Germany, which had been an enemy area in World War II. And the great speech given at the end of his trip was in which he recognized some very horrible things done by the Nazis against not only Jewish people, but other people, but particularly against Jewish people who were killed because they were Jewish. That was genocide. But in his speech, he said, we cannot accept, and he said, we Americans cannot accept the concept of collective guilt.
Croatian people never were part of the Nazi government. That this was a small, quisling government, a very small percentage of the people, and somehow the whole nation of Croatia has been tainted. But I think what I pointed out in the book, and what struck me, is that President Tuđman was not parochial in his approach. He took not only the honor of the people of Croatia that he was defending, but he said the memory of the Jewish people who died were offended. The people who are attacking Croatia and creating new historical facts, which are not facts, are also demeaning the memory of the Jewish people who died at the hands of the Nazis.
Although he was able to defend his doctoral thesis successfully, his opposition to the official interpretation of historical events made Dr. Tuđman's life more difficult. Tuđman's work exposing the policies of hegemony apparent in the first Yugoslavia made him very aware of the same policies flourishing in the second Yugoslavia. Alexander Ranković, the Serbian chief of police and vice president of Yugoslavia, sought to eliminate a variety of ethnic and nationalistic leanings in his pursuit of Serbanization of Yugoslavia. Fortunately for history, Ranković eventually proved to be a threat to his boss Tito and was removed from power in 1966. After the fall of Ranković and his state security forces, Croatians began to feel more at ease. Croatian scholars took the bold step of defending the unique Croatian language, citing all the Croatian literary works written since the Middle Ages. However, Belgrade ignored them and continued to impose the Serbian language on the Croats. Angered, Croat scholars composed a manifesto entitled Declaration on the Name and Condition of the Standard Croatian Language. The Yugoslav communists branded the Croats as dangerous subversives, and many were persecuted and lost their jobs. Tuđman's institute is branded as one of the nursing grounds for the subversion, and Tuđman himself was labeled a dissident and forced into an early retirement at the age of 45. The persecution by the Yugoslavian state did not discourage the Croats, as they received encouragement from young Croatian communists who were coming to power in the late 1960s. Tuđman published his next book, Great Ideas and Small Nations. In it, he analyzed the lost illusions of pan-Slavism and the unsuccessful idea that one could create a common state of all Southern Slavs. Tuđman concluded, quote, all these and similar utopian illusions keep reminding us that the great and ruling nations always try to use great ideas, including the idea of socialist internationalism, or universal integration, or the so-called free democracy, against the small and subordinated nations. The early 1970s brought new developments to the Yugoslavian political scene. The official Croatian communist government opposed the Yugoslavian communist hegemony and formally requested that the second Yugoslavia become a federation of individual nations. Tuđman re-entered the political arena and pushed for this multinational confederation. The movement toward confederacy struck a chord in all Croatians. It was given momentum and force by the students at the University of Zagreb, as well as students from other Croatian schools. But it was not to be. Tito, although he looked favorably on the Croatian ideas in the beginning, changed his mind under pressure from his Belgrade generals. Tito soon removed Croatian patriots from their powerful positions in his communist elite, as Serbs and the older hard-line Croatian communists seized power in Croatia. 1972, Croatian spring becomes Serbian summer. Many Croatian intellectuals were imprisoned. Dr. Tuđman was arrested and sentenced to 2 years in prison, as well as being prohibited to speak in public. His punishment, in comparison to others, is relatively light, thanks to the intervention of Miroslav Krleža, who was a close friend of Tito.
Ja sam mogao izbjeći zatvor. Na koji način? Na taj da ne sam u pustim režimu, to nisam želio, ali pozivali su me na sveučilište i u institute, mogao sam otići u Njemačku, Švedsku, Kanadu, pa čak i u Ameriku. Nisam otišao jer sam znao da će se sudbina hrvatskog naroda rješavati u zemlji i bio sam prema tome spreman na sve konsekvencije takvog čina, takvog ostanka.
In the early 1970s, the future of the Croatian people did not look bright. Many of their intellectuals and young leaders were in prison. When released, Tuđman withdrew from public protest.
Veoma je zanimljivo ovo da je i režim htio da odem van jer bi to bilo jednostavnije da mene hapse kao nosilaca partizanske spomenice, kao prvoborca antifašizma, kao generala, kao profesora.
He would not break his silence until 1977 when he spoke on Swedish television. 1 year later, he gave an interview to a Croatian newspaper. And then in 1980, Dr. Tuđman was interviewed on West German TV. By now, the communist government was furious. The Zagreb press branded him as a dangerous counter-revolutionary, and the secret police placed him under surveillance. That same year, 1980, Tito, the communist dictator, who had kept Yugoslavia united for 35 years, died. Even though he had amended the Constitution to give the republics more independence, in reality, very little had changed. Serbs in Belgrade continued to suppress all forms of Croatian nationalism. Dr. Tuđman became the first victim in the post-Tito era. As a well-known Croatian dissident, he is put on political trial, an object lesson for other nationalists. All of Dr. Tuđman's interviews are used against him. Accused of, quote, falsely presenting the situation in Croatia, unquote, he is sentenced to 3 more years in prison with an additional 5-year ban on public appearances. Tuđman defended his actions and words, explaining, "I belong to the kind of people who cannot fatalistically reconcile themselves to injustice."
Kad su me 82. doveli ponovno u zatvor, onda su me 2 udbovca zvala na razgovor i pokušali da mi kažu gdje sam, ja kažem, a ja sam njima rekao, slušajte, nemam ni šta razgovarati ja s vama. Tu ste napravili kapelicu i sobe gdje je bio jednom Josip Broz u zatvoru. Ja ne znam da li ću ja izaći živ ili ne iz zatvora, kakvom ćete me smrću vi moriti i da li ću ja izdržati, ali vam jamčim da će jednom tu pisati da je tu bio dr. Franjo Tuđman u zatvoru i zbog vas. Nisu se snašli, kažu, šta to vi govorite o one? Kažem, to vam govorim i molim, sad sam u vašim rukama, ali da znate.
While he was on trial, Tuđman's work, Nationalism in Contemporary Europe, was published in America by the Columbia University Press. During the 2 years he was incarcerated, his book received acclaim and increased his reputation as an historian worldwide. His analysis not only of the ethnic issues facing Yugoslavia, but also the British Isles, the Soviet Union, and Eastern Europe earned him great respect. The Croats realized their dream of freedom after Tito's death would not happen easily. In fact, things got worse under the rule of Serbian Slobodan Milosevic. Milosevic started yet another campaign of Serbian hegemony, using the united Yugoslavia ideal as a cover for Serbian domination of Croatia, Slovenia, Macedonia, and the other republics. In 1988, Milosevic cracked down on Albanian dissenters in Kosovo in southern Serbia. His message was clear: accept Serbian rule or expect war. The Albanians in southern Serbia were persecuted. What small and frail autonomy they did have was forcibly removed when Milosevic suspended parliament and moved troops into the area. Suddenly, Kosovo was a police state. Vojvodina, once part of Croatia and Hungary, also had her autonomy stripped away. Milosevic, fresh from abolishing these two provinces using old-school communist barbarism, now turned his eyes towards other nations. His Yugoslav army, led by Serbs and Montenegrins, proved to be a powerful trump card due to its imposing size. Slovenia, a republic situated far west of Yugoslavia, did not interest him. He was enamored of Croatia. With Milosevic at the helm, Serbia wished to realize its ancient dream: access to the Adriatic Sea. He sought control of the Dalmatian coast and the ancient city of Dubrovnik, where the Croats had lived since the 7th century. Milosevic also wanted Slavonia, a region in northern Croatia, rich in oil and agriculture. The official government in Croatia was silent, fearful to take a stand. But Croatian dissidents, including Tuđman, recognizing the imminent danger, raised their voices against Serbia. Around this time, public pressure mounted in Yugoslavia to allow other political parties to exist besides the communists. This hadn't been allowed since World War II. In February 1989, Dr. Franjo Tuđman and his colleagues founded the Croatian Democratic Union. Time and circumstances were now very favorable for Tuđman. His book, Horrors of War, is published in Croatia. In it, he analyzed myths and wars from ancient to modern times. Tuđman traveled to the United States and Canada to gain the much-needed support of the more than 2 million Croatian immigrants, advocating his goal of an independent Croatian state. By 1990, it was clear that nothing could stop the renaissance of Croatia. The Croatian Democratic Union and Dr. Tuđman had won the support of Croatian people everywhere. The communists were forced to allow the first free elections in Croatia since World War II. Tuđman and his party won an absolute majority. Communism was dead in Croatia. Communism was dying all over Europe. Germany reunited. The Soviet Union collapsed. Serbia was now the only country in Europe where the communists stayed in power. Tuđman and his party assumed control of the Croatian government. Dr. Franjo Tuđman became the first president of the modern Croatian state, the Republic of Croatia. By the end of 1990, Croatia had a new constitution, and the Republic of Croatia was declared an independent and sovereign state. On paper, however, the Socialist Republic of Yugoslavia still existed, and the Serbs did not want to relinquish control easily. The overpowering Yugoslav army was on alert, waiting for Belgrade to signal the attack on the new Croatia. Milosevic begins to mount his full-scale military attack. He first goes after Slovenia, though that is not his real goal. Croatia is next to break all ties with Yugoslavia based on a referendum. 95% of Croatians voted for full independence. Milosevic counts on the Serbs who live in Croatia. These Serbs were originally settled there systematically after 1945 as part of a long-range plan in order to be in the position to cut off vital traffic lines, especially along the Greater Serbian demarcation line. The plan is now becoming reality, and the roadblocks almost succeed in cutting off the south from the north of Croatia. It becomes quite obvious that the grand idea is to create a Serbian mini-state inside Croatia, with Knin as its center. The Serbian army finally receives its commands from Belgrade. Attack Croatia by land, sea, and air. 90% of the Serbians living in Croatia choose to join the attack on their longtime Croatian neighbors. Croatia is caught totally unprepared. Local policemen and volunteers sacrifice themselves, while Dr. Tuđman seeks weapons wherever possible. Within a few months, Croatia succeeds in creating an army. Despite overwhelming odds, the Croats would not go down easily. With the exception of Vukovar, the Serbs and their well-equipped Yugoslav army could not conquer any large Croatian city. While Vukovar resisted surrender, heroically defended by its residents and volunteers for months, Tuđman continued to build and equip a Croatian army. Many Yugoslav army barracks in Croatia were surrounded by Croatian forces, preventing them from taking any offensive action. Some Serbs surrendered, while others were captured. The Croats allowed many to return to their homes. Tuđman and his military operations were successful, but he wanted to end the war. He offered to start ceasefire and peace negotiations, appealing to the international community. At first, the governments of Western Europe did not respond. However, citizens of the world began to protest the atrocities inflicted upon the Croatian people.
I am indeed very much aware of the tragedy and have been explaining it wherever I have spoken, either in this country or in the United States. At first, people had been given to understand, wrongly, that it was just a question, serious as though that is, of civil war between two different groups. They needed to be informed that it was between communist Serbia, who was taking control both of the army and of the country, and democratic Croatia and Slovenia, both of whom had exercised their right to become independent. I then duly explained that Croatia and Slovenia have no army. They have only got the weapons they can capture and the ones they can get hold of, and they are entitled to a right of self-defense against those who attack them.
After a long siege, Vukovar finally fell and met a horrible fate. Serbs ravaged the conquered city without pausing. They even executed the wounded lying in Vukovar Hospital. Serbian guns begin the attack on Dubrovnik. More than 11,000 shells fall upon the world-famous medieval Croatian city.
I think now that many, many people know the Adriatic coast, and that means that they have some kind of personal touch and contact with them. But I must make it quite clear, in my view, the West should be on the side of liberty and democracy and justice. And the more we can get home to people the true situation, and this is happening in the heart of Europe, and that the cries of the Croatian people are not being heard, the more we can awaken them to the true position. I should say, by way of comfort, that there are now a number of organizations who are trying to help the Croatians with practical help.
In fact, I stood up when Croatia was attacked in September 1991. There was then Austria asked as the first member country of the Security Council, a special meeting of the Security Council must take place because there's aggression going on from the Serb government against Croatia. Then the first meeting which took place of Security Council in this business was practically in a meeting of foreign ministers. So I still remember the French foreign minister said, we have to intervene. Otherwise, all the rules of international law, human rights will be neglected. And he said, quoted a famous French philosopher who said that strength, force, without the rule of law leads to tyranny. Rules of law without strings makes ridiculous.
Serbian airplanes bombed the presidential residence in the very center of the old city of Zagreb. Just 2 minutes earlier, Dr. Tuđman had left that part of the building, avoiding an attempt on his life for the second time. International mediators managed to negotiate a Christmas ceasefire in December of 1991. Croatia had managed to survive, with one of its occupied, cities on the coast still threatened.
And towards the end of 1991, with the international recognition beginning of Croatia by several European states and the Vatican, the U.S. position changed, and we accepted. I say we, the Americans, officially. I was very pleased with that because I always felt, and I was a very strong advocate for the small countries in Africa. They had the right to independence. And I was very pleased that Czechoslovakia then became really independent again, and Hungary and Poland. And I myself asked, why not? But actually, when I was the ambassador to the Vatican asked me to send that to Washington. Why not Croatia? Why not Slovenia? So finally it happened.
In January 1992, the Republic of Croatia is recognized by many other countries, including the United States. Croatian morale reached even greater heights when Croatia became a member of the United Nations.
Io sono stato anche all'interno del mio paese uno dei sostenitori della necessità del riconoscimento della sovranità e dell'indipendenza croata, sia perché in questo modo si dava un riconoscimento al diritto di autodeterminazione e ai diritti di libertà e di indipendenza di un popolo che tra l'altro si stava conquistando, sia perché ritenevo che questo fosse il modo per giungere più rapidamente a una sistemazione pacifica e territoriale del problema della ex Jugoslavia, e sia perché ritenevo che politica del mio paese dovesse essere quella, dopo così lunghi periodi di incomprensione, di buon vicinato nei confronti dei nuovi stati che sorgevano per lo scioglimento della federazione jugoslava. Per questo ho voluto come portare io il riconoscimento della Repubblica Italiana alla nascente Croazia e sono arrivato a Zagabria proprio il giorno previsto per il riconoscimento. In giornate molto dure per la Croazia, vi era ancora uno stato bellico, di tensione con le armate federali. Io passai vicino a quella che era la frontiera dei combattimenti e mi trovai in una Zagabria entusiasta, mi trovai in una Zagabria che con molta maturità ma anche con molto fervore celebrava la sua indipendenza ma si accingeva anche a difenderla.
The UN now sends forces to preserve the ceasefire and help with realizing the peace agreement. Tuđman won the presidential election with a large majority, but he is faced now with seemingly insurmountable problems. The communist regime and the war had left Croatia's economy in shambles. Tuđman worked feverishly to transform Croatia into a capitalistic system. It was not an easy task, as the war had exhausted financial resources and was still keeping tourists away. Tuđman is tireless in his goal to rebuild Croatia, but circumstances forced him into a risky alliance with the leader of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnia-Herzegovina is comprised of 3 separate ethnic groups: Bosnian Muslims, Croats, and Serbs. In medieval times, Bosnia had been part of Croatia, but eventually became independent. When the Ottomans invaded Europe, they conquered Bosnia, but they were stopped by the Croats. Still, many Islamic people settled in the region, and their descendants were now persecuted by the Serbs. Now the Serb-led Yugoslav army attacks the Croats and Muslims in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Over 70,000 Muslims and Croats are massacred. The international city of Sarajevo is kept under siege for the next 5 years, with huge sections destroyed. Tuđman promised to provide everything in Croatia's power to secure freedom and safety for all the Croats living in the region. While his army fought, he went forward into diplomatic channels. Alija Izetbegović, the Bosnian Muslim leader, could not stop the Serbs by himself. Yet the world powers were reluctant to help him with his idea to create a small Muslim state in Europe. He formed an army, but rather than go directly at the Serbian front, he initially attacked the Croats in Bosnia-Herzegovina, thinking he could grab some of the Croatian coast. Luckily for all concerned, he changed direction, and with the help of the United States, an agreement was soon forged between Tuđman and Izetbegović. The agreement set up a Croat and Muslim joint federation in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Allied with Izetbegović, Dr. Tuđman now devoted himself to liberating the occupied territories in Croatia. He undertook limited military operations to push the Serbs back to key points in Dalmatia. While his soldiers fought, he exerted diplomatic pressure on the United Nations to declare formally that the occupied Croatian territory was indeed part of Croatia. The UN passed such a resolution. The spring of 1995, Tuđman ordered a surprise attack on the Serbian stronghold in western Slavonia. Traffic through Slavonia was now possible again, and the situation in northern Croatia was improved. Most world military experts assumed the Croatians would play a waiting game, taking no further actions, and they would have been correct had the Bosnian Serbs not threatened Bihać, a city close to the Croatian border. Tuđman is forced to deal with Serbs in western Bosnia and Croatia who were planning to unite into a small state. August 1995, Tuđman directed his army, now strong and well-trained, to launch an attack on the Serb positions in the area of the Croatian Republic known as the Krajina. This massive military campaign, the largest of the war, surprised and overwhelmed the Serb forces, driving them to northern Bosnia in chaos. Unfortunately, the battle also created more than 150,000 Serbian refugees who had lived in the Krajina for generations. Despite Tuđman's invitation to come back to their homes, they have yet to return. Almost the entire territory of the Republic of Croatia had been secured. Tuđman celebrated and visited Knin, one of the capitals of the medieval Croatian state, which had been under Serbian control for over 5 years. Croatia celebrated her success on all fronts. The military situation in the region had been stabilized, and the Croatian army was now respected.
Žalim što mnogi ljudi nisu doživjeli to zajedno s nama, koji su to zavrijedili. Vidite, svijet je takav kakav jeste. Legenda govori da je Gospodu Bogu trebalo 7 dana da stvori svijet. A stvorio ga je, mogao ga je stvoriti samo na sliku i priliku čovjeka. A kakav je taj svijet? Najvredniji i najplemenitiji što može biti, sa najvećim moralnim, etičkim, kulturno-znanstvenim vrednotama. Ali i u isto vrijeme i najnesavršeniji, najopakiji, najnesretniji. Da ga je teško zamisliti da može biti gori i opaki. Ali nema drugog.
Zagreb, the capital of the Republic of Croatia, had been visited by prominent statesmen and religious leaders. 1 million people attended a mass celebrated by Pope John Paul II and confirmed the ancient alliance between Croatian Prince Branimir and the Roman Catholic Church from the 9th century. All Croatians savored the spiritual return to Western European civilization. Serbia still retained control of the Croatian part of the Danube Valley. Tuđman decided to reintegrate this region peacefully. The terms worked out allow Croatian authority to return to the area in July 1997. At the peak of his success, Tuđman suddenly became ill and traveled to Washington, D.C. for special tests. But the actual diagnosis remains inconclusive. Returning to Croatia, Tuđman paid a surprise and risky visit to Vukovar, which was still in Serb hands. although United States General Klein had it under temporary administration. 1997, Tuđman is now 75 years old. He can look back on his accomplishments and be satisfied. He is the creator and president of the modern Croatian state. His wife heads a relief organization for the children of Croatia. His country is once again alive and on the road to success.
Io ho incontrato più volte Tuđman e posso dire di aver stretto con lui anche un rapporto di amicizia. L'ho trovato nelle sue funzioni prima di eminente leader politico, prima della costituzione dello Stato croato, poi nella sua posizione di leader e presidente della nuova Croazia, ma l'ho conosciuto anche sul piano personale, l'ho conosciuto con la sua famiglia, con i suoi figli, con i suoi nipotini, nelle incantevoli cornici di Brioni nel quale egli mi ha invitato. E quella di Tuđman è una figura molto complessa. Egli da giovane è stato un patriotta, ha perduto anche il fratello nella guerra di liberazione contro il nazifascismo, è stato uno dei più giovani generali dell'armata di Tito, è stato un brillante professore di storia. Attraverso questa sua lunga meditazione è diventato uno dei primi leader della rinascita croata, si è affermato come leader democratico, come combattente, come presidente. È uomo di grande finezza, di grande simpatia umana, ma anche di grande finezza politica basata sulla sua cultura e chiaramente sulla sua esperienza.
Kao dijete imao sam dva ovako ideala. Da ne budem nikad vojnik, jer sam mrzio rat, krv, nisam mogao gledati pile kako se kolja, kamoli krv čovjeka i tako da ne budem nikada vojnik i liječnik, iz istih razloga nisam mogu podnositi. Kao što vidite, život me prisilio da budem vojnik, da provedem ne samo 4 godine u Drugom svjetskom ratu, nego gotovo toliko godina i u Domovinskom ratu na svoj način, na drugi način, ali ipak nije mi dopustio, znači, da se bavim onim čime sam se želio baviti, znači filozofijom, pisanjem, pa ni umjetnošću na način možda kakav sam, ne želeći ni sebi priznati, želio.
I think he's one of the great men, great leaders of the world, and he's proven himself in his leadership by past example, whether he was a fighter or a philosopher or a historian, but certainly a politician in the best sense of the word.
Es ist so, dass natürlich sein Land in einer außerordentlich schwierigen Zeit geführt hat. Er hat es zur Unabhängigkeit geführt und was für uns wichtig war, ist, dass er immer die gute Zusammenarbeit mit der Europäischen Gemeinschaft und der Europäischen Union gesucht hat. Und das ist natürlich von großer Bedeutung für die friedliche Lösung der Probleme hier in der Region.
I think he's a great politician and great. But then, I think he served the peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and definitely he served the Croatia because some part of the Croatia was under occupation, and then he served Croatia just creating the economical atmosphere, and Croatia is one of the developed country now in the Central Europe. As human being, I have seen him all the time, very, very sensitive about the bloodshed. And then he tried to do everything to stop the bloodshed.
The promotion of Tuđman's book, Horrors of War, takes place at the Harvard Club in New York City. Dr. Franjo Tuđman made it clear to those who will govern after he is gone that Croatia should have no interest in Balkan integration. Croatia is a country which belongs to and shares in a Western European spiritual and cultural heritage, as it has for over 1,000 years.
I think he's a great man in these events of regaining national independence and democracy for those countries down there.
It was a very interesting combination, but not too unusual in history when you look at who emerges as the leader in a new state, particularly after a struggle. If you look at our own George Washington, after the struggle against the British to free the country, and you look, for example, at Charles de Gaulle after World War II, in another way, Adenauer was a different set of circumstances. Germany was destroyed, and he emerged from the ashes to give leadership. He has those characteristics.
Onda bih želio i to da u toj slobodnoj demokratskoj Hrvatskoj bude što manje takvih primjera da bilo koji hrvatski čovjek, normalan, razuman čovjek, ne bi morao reći da nije želio takvu Hrvatsku.